Hi there, folks. I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Thank you so much for joining me here on KJLH for another episode of The Breakdown, where we pull you aside for just a few important moments every week, and we talk about the issues that matter. Just a quick reminder that you can find me on the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH. You can also find me on my personal Instagram page at Dara Tucker B. On all other platforms, I'm at Dara Starr Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. I do lots of political commentary these days on my socials. My normal content is also called The Breakdown. These are 5 to 10 minute pieces that I do on all kinds of topics: pop culture, music, film, history, race, and culture. I'm looking forward to getting back to doing much more of that kind of content once this election season is over. But right now, of course, we're all focused on getting this boulder over this hill and ensuring that we do not allow fascism to make its way into our democracy. So the work I'm doing right now is primarily focused on making sure that we all understand what's at stake this year. And I'm really heartened to see the kind of support that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have received over the past few weeks. As I've told you all, I'm going to be at the DNC all week long this week. I have never been to a political convention like this before, so this is going to be a really interesting experience for me. I was telling my producer, Van Everett, that having grown up around a lot of hyper-religious environments, growing up in an evangelical environment, I'm used to being around a lot of fanaticism, or should I say I used to be accustomed to being around a lot of fanaticism. And I've moved away from that a lot with regard to religion since reaching adulthood. So I cringe just a little bit at the idea of being around a lot of folks who are a little bit too high about anything, to be frank. I much prefer being in the position of an observer and a reporter and taking in the sights and sort of watching from my perch a little bit. That's more my style. But as I understand it, the Clintons will be there, Obama will be there. So it'll be a really historic event, and I'm glad to have been invited to be a part of it. So I'm looking forward to sharing a bit of that with you all when I get back next week. Of course, Kamala Harris will be formally accepting the nomination at the convention, so it'll definitely be an honor to be in the room for that historic moment. And if she should be elected, I would actually love to attend the inauguration if possible. And that leads me to one of the things that I've been really meditating on this week. As you all know, I spend a decent amount of time online with the kind of work that I do, and I get to observe and often be a part of conversations that are happening in those spaces that are not necessarily happening around the water cooler. And there's a whole conversation that's bubbling up to the surface on TikTok right now, particularly among leftists and Black folks, around Black people's support of Kamala Harris. As you all know, progressives and leftists, particularly young ones who are active on apps like TikTok, have been laser focused on the issue of Gaza and the genocide that's happening there that's being enabled by our government. And this is a really important demographic for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, even more so than for a candidate like Trump, who's not really relied on support from that demographic. Kamala Harris is now on TikTok, and she's always understood the importance of reaching out to the younger generation and being aware of their concerns. And I honestly believe she just doesn't want to play lip service to them. I think she's made it pretty obvious through a lot of the statements that she's made around a ceasefire that she intends to have a very different approach to Gaza than Biden has. Biden has been our most pro-Israel president. Barack Obama and even George Bush and Reagan, they pushed back quite a bit on Israel, but Biden, he has not. So a lot of young people and progressives have rightly called him out on his part in enabling the genocide that's happening in Gaza right now. And they are extremely frustrated with his inability to stand up to Benjamin Netanyahu. But it seems like Kamala may have a bit of a different approach. We'll have to see. Right now, there are folks who are coming after her for her perceived support of the genocide in Gaza. As you've probably seen, they're showing up at her rallies and they're interrupting her with protests. And there have been some mixed reactions with regard to her response to these protests.
Social Security and Medicare. He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
So that was her response at the Michigan rally, where there are a lot of Arab Americans who don't feel that their voices are being heard right now with regard to the slaughter of the Palestinian people. And a lot of folks got upset at the fact that she pushed back by telling them that their only other option was Trump. So then at her rally in Arizona, she changed her approach a little bit.
Hold on, everybody. Hold on. Here's the thing. We are all in here together. I'm told an extraordinary number of folks who are here together because we love our country. We're here to fight for our democracy. Which includes respecting the voices that I think that we are hearing from. And let me just say this on topic of what I think I'm hearing over there. Let me just speak to that for a moment, and then I'm going to get back to the business at hand. So let me say, I have been clear. Now is the time to get a ceasefire deal and get the hostage deal done. Now is the time. And the president and I are working around the clock every day to get that ceasefire deal done and bring the hostages home. So I respect your voices, but we are here to now talk about this race in 2024.
So as you can hear there, she's gone out of her way to at least let these folks know that she does hear them, that she empathizes with them, and she wants to see an end to the violence. My problem with a lot of this is that Kamala Harris is not yet the president of the United States. She hasn't even really set forth her policy agenda. So I'm wondering why these folks are showing up at her rallies instead of protesting at the White House. Joe Biden is still the president. In my estimation, Kamala Harris is not in any more of a position to set policy around Gaza than Donald Trump is. She's auditioning for the job of president, just like Trump. So at the very least, if you're going to show up at her rallies, you ought to be showing up at Trump's too. And just to be honest, the whole thing does really carry whiffs of misogyny and racism as far as I'm concerned. And it seems like I'm not the only one who's picked up on this. There are a lot of folks on TikTok in particular that have started calling this out, meaning the anti-Blackness within the pro-Palestinian movement. There are a lot of folks within that movement who have been highly critical of Black people in particular, who have thrown their support behind Kamala Harris, and they claim that supporting Kamala Harris for president is an affront to the Palestinian struggle. And on one hand, you can understand the frustration of a people who have not been listened to by this administration thus far. Their people are being slaughtered, and they're being told again and again that a ceasefire is near, and that's what we supposedly want, but the violence just continues, and Congress and Biden continue to approve more and more weapons funding. So I am 100% empathetic to their concerns in that regard. But the part that I don't line up with is when they start to insist that we withhold our support from Kamala Harris as a way of protesting the Biden administration's actions in Gaza. They've labeled Joe Biden Genocide Joe, so you have a nickname for the man, and you vilified him for his positions, and you wanted him out of there. So now that he's out of there, and now we have another candidate that, yes, is his vice president, but who has not been the one setting policy in that region. But before she even has a chance to state what her policies are or would be, before she's even officially accepted her party's nomination, you're doing everything you can to waylay her campaign and saddle her with all of his baggage, which in my estimation is no better than what the Republicans are doing. You're really carrying their water for them. And many people expect Black folks who have been supportive of Palestine to participate in this undercutting of Kamala Harris. And that idea is a little bit activating for me, I have to say. It really gets my goat just a bit, because my criticism of these folks and the criticism that I think a lot of people have for these folks who insist that withholding their vote is somehow going to do Palestinians any good, my criticism of them is, what is your plan? So you derail Kamala Harris's campaign for the presidency, which I don't think they'll be able to do, but that's their goal. You derail her campaign, and then what? I have a mutual named Nick Powers, who I would highly recommend following, who does a lot of mathematical analysis around voting trends and polls and that kind of thing. And he's pointed to several polls that indicate that Palestinians believe that Kamala Harris would be much better from their perspective than Trump would, which we all know is the case. Obviously, Trump has said that he would allow Benjamin Netanyahu to, quote, finish the job. He doesn't care if Gaza becomes a parking lot, and that is not an exaggeration. So undercutting Kamala Harris because she isn't doing enough with regard to Gaza just to make room for Donald Trump to then take over and turn Gaza into a parking lot, that is a fool's errand as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of these folks are satisfied with their unwavering moral superiority, and they don't really make room for much else. And I want to reiterate that I do understand the frustration when our government is not listening to our concerns about what we are aiding and abetting where Gaza is concerned. But I think it's possible to be deeply concerned about Gaza and to be doing everything we can to pressure our government to shift its policy on Gaza and to also act in our own best interest, particularly as Black people. So there have been a lot of Black folks pushing back lately in online spaces and kind of setting some folks straight about where we stand. In other words, we do not consent to being sacrificed for your moral high ground. We are going to make sure that we are taking care of our best interest at home while continuing to advocate for Gaza. And in my estimation, it's not an either-or situation, though some have definitely made it that. Now, at the same time that all of this is going on, we have Trump sort of spinning out, for lack of a better term. I don't know that that man has ever been right in the head, but he seems to have deteriorated pretty rapidly since Kamala took over, or maybe since the assassination attempt. I don't know. But he just doesn't seem to be processing Kamala's nomination very well. It's like he just can't get over the fact that he's not running against Joe Biden. And he's just going to sit on the sidelines and cry foul until somebody hands him a pacifier or something. I don't know. So he's on his social media platform, Truth Social, ranting and whining about Kamala Harris's candidacy supposedly being illegal and claiming that he's going to sue over it. Then he's yakking about her rally sizes supposedly being fabricated when there is clear video evidence that she's been drawing tens of thousands of people. But he claims it's all AI generated. He's clearly been watching TikTok and YouTube conspiracy videos, bless his heart. He's like that old relative that just gets something in his craw and he just won't let it go. You try to tell him, no, Grandpa, that's not how it is. That's not how this works. But he just won't listen to you. He just keeps repeating the same thing again and again. And there's nothing that you can do to deter him. Now, they ran Joe Biden out of the race because of his cognitive decline, but we're seeing the same thing with Trump. He's just louder about it. But I don't see the press harping on that. I mean, even if they did, it's not like the Republicans would jettison him in the way that the Democrats did with Joe Biden. But why they're not willing to call a spade is beyond me. He hasn't been well for a long time, but he gets away with it because his adoring fans are so loyal. But it's not going to be so easy to dismiss it when he causes the Republicans to lose this election. And that's what it's looking like at this point. As soon as the Democrats got a candidate that they could get behind, the polls started to shift drastically and quickly. And Trump cannot get his head around it. He cannot deal with the fact that he's up against a cultural phenomenon, and it isn't him. He's launching all the same sexist and racist attacks that he did against Hillary and Obama in the past, and it's just not sticking. I mean, I've watched a couple of minutes of one of his rallies recently where he was just ranting and yammering, and I thought, who would want to go to that? Why would it make you feel good to show up and listen to the 78-year-old man air out all of his grievances against his so-called enemies? Even if you supported his policies, why would you want to stand there and hold a sign and listen to him complain about everybody that had done him wrong? And that's a lot of what has always animated his followers, grievance.
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
I think a lot of the country is just sick of that at this point. But he doesn't have any other fuel to run on. As he said at a recent fundraiser, I am who I am. But with the direction things are going in, you have to ask yourself, where does the Republican Party go next? Let's just assume that Kamala Harris pulls it off and we get through the melee of this election season and the dust settles and Trump is not in the White House. Assuming we still have our democracy, what happens to the Republican Party? Because Donald Trump will not be its future. And really, Nikki Haley called all of this. I'll play you a few quotes from her all the way back in February and March of this year.
And if you look at what's happened over the past few years, we need to win. Under Trump, we lost in 2018. We lost in 2020. We lost in 2022. How many times do we have to do this before we realize that that's not a winning scenario? Look at any of the general election polls. In every one of those polls, I defeat Biden by up to 17 points. Don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this primary. It matters. There will be a female president of the United States. But this is the hard truth. It's either going to be me or Kamala Harris. If Donald Trump is the nominee, Joe Biden wins and Kamala Harris becomes president. That's a fact. He can't win
So Nikki Haley called it. She said that Donald Trump would not win this election. She said that there would be a female president, and I'm inclined to believe her. So once that happens, presuming that it does happen, what then? Because Donald Trump has the Republican Party in a vice grip. It's essentially become the MAGA party. His daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is the co-chair of the RNC. Trump himself is essentially the head of the party. They have taken over the Senate and Congress like a cancer and deposed anyone who was disloyal to Trump. You got all sorts of far-right people in there who can't get a thing done now. People like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. They kicked out Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House and installed Mike Johnson, who is very much allied with the Heritage Foundation and groups like that. I mean, the whole party has just coalesced around Trump in a way that we have never done for any candidate in the past, as far as I know. Trump is so deeply entrenched in the party, and it's really become a vehicle for him to exert his dominance. I don't even think they know who they are without him anymore. They got rid of folks like Adam Kissinger and Liz Cheney who dared to butt heads with him. They've driven off moderates like Mitt Romney and so many others that could not stomach him. There really are no moderate Republicans anymore. So the party is in an identity crisis, and that will become so much more apparent if Trump loses the presidency. This will have been his third run, and if he loses, everyone will see that 2016 was really a fluke, and he is incapable of winning another presidential campaign. He'll be as old as Biden is now in 2028, and nobody is trying to deal with that. They will have to move on. So what happens once he's gone? Does he take a third of the kingdom like the fallen angel and siphon him off as retribution for the Republicans abandoning him? Because you know he's going to say that he actually won, even if he didn't. So in his mind, he'll be the rightful president, and the party will have no reason to kick him to the curb. But they'll obviously know that they cannot survive unless they lob off the dead weight. If I had to guess at this point, I would say that the Republican Party will be significantly weakened once he leaves. It'll be like having a major limb amputated, because he's not going to make it easy for them. It's going to be an ugly break, and he's going to make it very clear that he is aggrieved. If I had to guess, I would say the Republicans will begin to slowly but surely excise him from their ranks, and they're going to shift more and more to the middle to try and run a candidate that can compete with Kamala Harris in 4 years. And that candidate will probably be Nikki Haley. And of course, all of the sycophants that went to kiss the ring with Trump will act like they never knew him. They'll act like they were all super reasonable all along, and they'll have absolutely no memory of having supported a maniacal, narcissistic, authoritarian, felonious madman, all for the sake of attaining power. And they didn't even get what they wanted. Even Nikki Haley, who said that she would never kiss the ring.
In politics, the herd mentality is enormously strong. A lot of Republican politicians have surrendered to it. The pressure on them was way too much. They didn't want to be left out of the club. Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud. I feel no need to kiss the ring. I have no fear of Trump's retribution.
Eventually went and kissed the ring and endorsed him at the RNC.
Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. Our country is at a critical moment. We have a choice to make. For more than a year, I said a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. After seeing the debate, everyone knows it's true. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. I'm here tonight because we have a country to save. And a unified Republican Party is essential for saving her.
All of his former rivals, Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, all of them eventually kowtowed to this man for the sake of holding on to power, even though they knew how horrible he was for their party and how horrible he was for the country. And the man couldn't win the popular vote to save his life. He's never won it. And that supposed red wave that was supposed to come in 2022 with Congress, with all of those candidates that he backed, never materialized. The majority of the super right-wing candidates that Trump tried to put his muscle behind in the 2022 midterms, they crashed and burned. So it seems like a lot of these folks have fallen for a bunch of bravado. The only real chance that he had to sneak his agenda through with Project 2025 and all of that stuff was for the majority of the American public to sleepwalk through this election. And that's what was about to happen with Joe Biden, unfortunately, which is why Trump is losing his ever-loving mind right now, trying to figure out what happened to his sure shot. His lead is completely gone in most swing states, if you believe the polls. This is certainly not the time to get overconfident, but the tide has clearly shifted, and he knows it. But all of that Project 2025 stuff was extremely unpopular. It was just a matter of making sure that the majority of the public was informed about it and that they had a different candidate that they could get behind. And both of those things have happened, so now Trump is up against the ropes and he knows it. And he's about to suffer another really humiliating public defeat, which is unconscionable to him. So we're about to see him throw an epic fit, and I mean one for the ages. But I want to caution against us getting too fearful about this. I'm seeing some reporting, even from journalists that I respect, that's whipping up a lot of fear among the masses, and I just don't think that that's the direction that we ought to be going in. If there's one thing that Harris and Walz have brought to this equation, it's joy. And that's something that's been sorely lacking in our politics. I think we have to stay locked into that feeling of optimism and joy and understand that Joe Biden has been preparing for Trump's foolery for 4 years. If there's one thing that Trump knows how to do, it's file frivolous lawsuits. He just filed a $100 million lawsuit against the Department of Justice for raiding Mar-a-Lago and discovering all those classified documents. Do you think that lawsuit is going to stick? No. But if he can raise tons of money from his gullible followers to continue to fuel his meritless cases, then there will always be some enterprising firm that's standing at the ready, waiting to take his money. So it's a win-win for him. He gets to look big and bad for suing everybody about every little thing, and he gets to throw his weight around and scare all sorts of folks with the thought of litigation around anything that he doesn't like. But it doesn't mean that any of this stuff is going to hold water in a court of law. He can challenge all the election results that he wants to, but it doesn't mean a thing if there is no validity to any of it. And we know that he has folks positioned at election boards and polling places and county clerks' offices all over the country right now, poised and ready to supposedly refuse to certify elections. But we have to remember that these folks have a legal duty to perform the tasks that they've been hired to do. And if they don't perform those duties when it's clear who the winner is, then they can be arrested or sued. So they can talk a big game on the front end, but when it comes down to it, if a judge says that you must certify the election, then they must certify the election. Let's not forget that they filed over 60 lawsuits in 2020 trying to refuse to certify, and in case after case, their concerns were completely thrown out and dismissed because they did not have a leg to stand on. Even with federal judges that had been appointed by Trump, it was all smoke and mirrors. And Trump is very good at that. A whole lot of lawyers have gotten very, very wealthy from taking on his baseless lawsuits. They don't mind taking his money for cases that they know absolutely will not fly, but they ingratiate themselves to him by doing his bidding. That's how it works with him. Just do your best to show him that you're going to fight tooth and nail for him, even when it makes absolutely no sense. And then he can just claim that the courts were biased against him. Let's not forget that they were saber-rattling just a few weeks ago, claiming that they were going to sue over Kamala being named the nominee without going through the primary process. But what's become of those lawsuits? Absolutely nothing. A lot of that big talk was coming from Mike Johnson, who is an attorney, and he's the Speaker of the House. He was the one that arranged all of those bogus lawsuits around the 2020 election. They know how to talk a big game, but when it comes down to it, these allegations have to stand up in a court of law, and most of the time, they do not. So I wouldn't worry too much about Trump claiming that he's going to start a bunch of legal pushback against the election. That's a little something that the Bible calls clattering cymbals. It's a whole lot of nothing, just meant to scare folks. Rest assured that Joe Biden and his team are very much aware that this was going to be Trump's strategy moving forward. And they have set up an infrastructure that's designed to respond to all of these challenges that they know are going to be coming. Joe Biden may be slowing down, but he is nobody's fool.
Are you confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January 2025?
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all. He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it. All the stuff about if we lose, there'll be a bloodbath. It's have to be a stolen election. Look what they're trying to do now in the local election districts where people count the votes. They're elected, they're putting people in place in states that they're going to count the votes, right? You can't love your country only when you win.
And the other important point to remember is that Trump does not have the benefit of occupying the White House, okay? That was the big concern in 2020. He essentially had squatters' rights. If he didn't want to leave, he didn't have to leave. That is, of course, until it became extremely obvious that he had no right to occupy the White House. And he wouldn't have wanted a whole scene where the police had to show up and escort him out. Well, we don't even have that factor in play this time around. Joe Biden is still the president, and Harris is the vice president. So Donald Trump is not even in the position to do what he did last time. And make no mistake, there will be chaos in terms of him challenging the results, but he will not win those challenges. Not getting overconfident or anything, we still have to work our butts off to ensure that this is a landslide election where there are no questions whatsoever as to who has won this thing. And I believe we can do that. So I hope you all take it seriously when we remind you to check your voter registration. Don't be caught slipping or sleeping. Make sure that all of that stuff is in order well before early voting and mail-in voting starts. And early voting in some places starts in about a month. You can go to vote.org/Dara to check and see if your voter registration is still active. We are getting into the home stretch now, so just about 2.5 more months and we will be at the finish line. But we all know this is lifelong work, of course. And I want to make a quick little plug. If you want to show off your Kamala swag, you can go to my profile on my Instagram page at Dara Tucker B and click the link in my bio. One of my followers is hand-making gorgeous earrings that say, "We won't go back." That's Kamala's slogan this year. And it's a really fun way to show your support for Kamala Harris right now. So check that out at the link in my bio. Be sure to follow the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH to stay up on the latest news regarding the election. And let's continue to stay informed about the crucial topics that affect our everyday lives. I'm Dara Star Tucker. You can find me on TikTok and YouTube and Threads at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with 1 R and Star with 2. I'm looking forward to talking with you all next week, same time, same place. Looking forward to bringing you some highlights from the DNC this week. And I hope you'll join me again for the breakdown next week. Until then, let's learn to shout.